it is reasonable to assume that millions are LGBTIQ plus people. Based on the evidence, it is also, unfortunately, reasonable to assume that human rights are not a reality for most of them. For refugees and I convened the 2021 Global Rights
Prueba de audio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. ¿Cómo me escuchas, Sonic? En traducción, ¿cómo me escuchan? En traducción se escucha bien y en el aula bien. Gracias, Sonic. Prueba de audio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. ¿En el aula se escucha bien? En traducción, ¿me pueden decir cómo me escuchan, por favor? Prueba de audio. En traducción, ¿se escucha bien? ¿Cómo me escuchas tú, Jera? Gracias. Voy con el siguiente. Prueba de audio. 1, 2, 3, 4. ¿En el aula se escucha bien? En traducción también. ¿Cómo me escuchas, Jera? Vale, voy con el último. Prueba de audio. 1, 2, 3, 4. En traducción me dicen que se escucha bien. En el aula también. ¿Cómo me escuchas tú, Jera?
Lo hacen porque enfrentan violencia estructural, criminalización, discurso de odio, violencia física y sexual, persecución estatal y comunitaria e incluso a riesgo de perder sus vidas. Estas causas, enraizadas en sistemas de exclusión y normas cis-heteropatriarcales, generan desplazamientos que suelen ser invisibles. Muy a menudo ni siquiera se les reconoce como desplazados forzados. Se habla de migrantes económicos o de personas sin estatus definido, borrando así la violencia específica que padecen por su orientación sexual, identidad o expresión de género. Durante el tránsito, las personas LGBTIQ+, enfrentan condiciones extremadamente precarias, acoso, violencia sexual, extorsiones de autoridades o actores armados y una falta casi total de espacios seguros o servicios especializados. Esta invisibilidad no es un detalle, agrava aún más su vulnerabilidad. Y al llegar a los países de destino, la situación no siempre mejora. Muchas veces, en lugar de encontrar espacios seguros, se topan con discriminación institucional, barreras lingüísticas, exclusión laboral, negación de acceso a la salud, precariedad habitacional, transfobia en los sistemas de asilo y desprotección jurídica. En resumen, se les niegan derechos que en teoría ya deberían estar garantizados. Hablar de migración forzada de personas LGBTQI+, es hablar de una deuda pendiente en materia de derechos humanos, de protección internacional y de justicia social. Pero también es hablar de la urgencia de producir conocimiento situado, sensible, interseccional y comprometido con la transformación. Este simposio, que forma parte de la iniciativa de desplazamiento forzado queer, busca ser justamente eso, un espacio para escuchar, reflexionar, intercambiar y construir desde las diferencias, sin normalizarlas ni negarlas. Queremos que este encuentro tenga eco más allá de estas paredes, que incida en la agenda internacional a través de la Declaración de Principios Multisectorial sobre el Desplazamiento Forzado Queer, un marco de referencia que convoca a gobiernos, empresas y organizaciones humanitarias a ofrecer respuestas más humanas, más dignas y justas para las personas LGBTQI+, desplazadas en el mundo. Lo que aquí trabajaremos debe servir no solo para entender mejor, sino para actuar mejor, para influir en políticas públicas, transformar instituciones, tejer redes de solidaridad y, sobre todo, para que las voces de quienes han sido históricamente silenciados ocupen el lugar que siempre les ha correspondido. La UNAM, como la universidad pública más importante del país y una de las más influyentes de América Latina, reafirma así su compromiso con los derechos humanos y con la producción de conocimientos críticos frente a los desafíos sociales de nuestro tiempo. El Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas, en particular, es un espacio emblemático, un foro donde históricamente se han gestado debates centrales para el desarrollo del derecho y la justicia en México. Al acoger este encuentro, el Instituto no solo abre sus puertas a un diálogo interdisciplinario e internacional, sino que reafirma su papel como referente en la defensa de los derechos humanos, ampliando las fronteras de la investigación jurídica hacia problemáticas urgentes como el desplazamiento forzado queer. En este espíritu de reflexión y acción, de escucha y construcción colectiva, le deseo mucho éxito en estos 2 días de trabajo. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, doctor Mauricio Padrón. Y bueno, pues ahora le voy a dar la palabra a la doctora Luciana Gandini. Ella es investigadora del Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas y coordinadora del Seminario Universitario de Estudios sobre Desplazamiento Interno, Migración, Exilio y Repatriación. Bienvenida, doctora. Muchas gracias.
Hola, muy buenos días. Perdón por esta llegada tan abrupta y tan tardía. No me gusta llegar tarde, creo que es la primera vez en mi vida que llego tarde a un lugar, con lo cual les pido una disculpa, pero aunque salgo con mucho tiempo, me tocaron 2 accidentes de tránsito y bueno, se complicó, así que una disculpa a todos, sobre todo al panel. Quisiera sumarme a las palabras del secretario académico del instituto y darles la bienvenida al Simposio Internacional sobre Desplazamiento y Diferencia, aprovechando la investigación para comprender la migración forzada de personas LGBTIQ+, que es convocado por el Williams Institute del UCLA y con el apoyo de Casa, Frida y Rainbow Railroad, y que nos sumamos con muchísimo gusto cuando recibimos la invitación desde el SUDIMER y desde el Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas. Estamos realmente muy honrados de recibirles en la Ciudad de México y en la UNAM, quien abrió las puertas para acoger hoy a casi 70 participantes de 22 países. Eso realmente nos honra mucho y les damos de verdad la más cordial bienvenida. Esperamos que disfruten estos 2 intensos días de jornada en estas instalaciones que están abiertas para todas y todos ustedes. El objetivo de este simposio, que es reunir una amplia y diversa comunidad de participantes, y eso es uno de los, quizás de los motivos que nos pone más contentos y por lo cual queremos apoyar, es decir, no solo del ámbito académico, sino también el intercambio con responsables de política pública, con personas activistas, con personas queers que van a presentar experiencias sobre el desplazamiento forzado. Esta apuesta por la inclusión busca fomentar entonces estas investigaciones colaborativas que aborden múltiples dimensiones y complejidades de este desplazamiento, ¿no? Bueno, todos ustedes y todas ustedes seguramente han visto que es un programa amplio que tiene paneles y talleres simultáneos que se llevarán a cabo durante estos 2 días con temas sumamente diversos, ¿no? Relacionados con las realidades legales del desplazamiento, con el rol de los organismos y las organizaciones de defensa de derechos de desplazados, forzados, queer y de otras identidades, que además discute el rol de las ONG dentro del sur global, algo que nos convoca y que hoy nos obliga a reflexionar sobre cómo se reconfigura este espacio de actores que trabajamos por las migraciones en general, ¿no? Que nos obliga hoy a pensar cómo se mueven los recursos, los lugares, los actores, quiénes pueden influir y quiénes pueden decidir en temas de política pública. Como decía, la acogida de un simposio como el que hoy nos convoca embona con la vocación universitaria y social que tiene nuestra casa de estudios. La UNAM, como una referente ineludible en México y en América Latina, está comprometida con la generación, por supuesto, de conocimiento científico, pero también con el compromiso y con la incidencia social. Estamos convencidos que una investigación cercana a la realidad comunitaria es tarea también de la universidad y así ha sido una línea clara desde la rectoría de la UNAM. En ese sentido, me gustaría compartirles que desde el inicio de este año la rectoría lanzó la iniciativa Acción Migrante, que es una plataforma que tiene por objetivo atender a las personas en movilidad y en la que formamos parte muchas dependencias de la UNAM, el SUDIMER y el Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas, sin duda, sobre todo, o en particular con un rol activo nuestra sede en Tijuana del instituto, y tiene una doble finalidad, que es brindar apoyo psicosocial y orientación jurídica a las personas migrantes, tanto aquellas que se encuentran en el territorio mexicano, como aquellas personas que van a retornar, es decir, mexicanos en retorno, de otras nacionalidades en México, y también apoya este apoyo psicosocial a todas las personas que trabajan en la red consular, que en este momento están también bastante demandadas, abrumadas, y que puede ser un rol complejo, ¿no? Entonces, me parecía muy importante mencionar este esfuerzo único donde confluyen competencias y habilidades diversas de las áreas de la universidad que se ponen al servicio de las personas migrantes y de las personas que atienden a las personas migrantes, ¿no? Entonces, no me tomo más tiempo, simplemente agradezco la oportunidad de que hoy compartamos este espacio. Muchas gracias por habernos invitado a organizar y a convocar este seminario, que es una oportunidad para visibilizar e impulsar una agenda investigativa y de incidencia social amplia, inclusiva y comprometida. Así que bienvenidas, bienvenidos, bienvenides, y esta será su casa por estos 2 días. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, doctora Gandini. Ahora le voy a dar la palabra a la embajadora Graciela Gómez García, directora general de vinculación con las organizaciones de la sociedad civil de la Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores. Bienvenida, embajadora. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Marisol. Pues bueno, antes que nada es un verdadero placer estar aquí esta mañana compartiendo panel con personas tan comprometidas a quienes reconozco y valoro. Saludo pues a Mauricio Padrón, quien lamentablemente se tuvo que retirar, a Luciana Gandini, a Ari Shaw, a Hassim Gaid y a Swati Sekhar, con quienes de verdad es un privilegio estar esta mañana. Queridas participantes, distinguidas invitadas y amigues comprometidos con la causa de la igualdad y la justicia. Es un honor para mí estar con ustedes esta mañana en este seminario tan importante organizado por Rainbow Railroad, el Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas de la UNAM, el Seminario Universitario de Estudios sobre Desplazamiento Interno, Migración, Exilio y Repatriación, el Williams Institute y Casa Frida. Les transmito antes que nada el saludo de nuestro canciller Juan Ramón de la Fuente, que como saben fue rector de esta casa también y creo que genuinamente su corazón sigue estando por acá, y de nuestro subsecretario para Asuntos Multilaterales y Derechos Humanos, Enrique Ochoa, quien muy particularmente tiene un interés y una preocupación con los temas de desplazamiento forzado, migración y en general con los derechos humanos de la comunidad LGBTQI+. México tiene una política exterior progresista y plenamente comprometida con los derechos humanos. Para nosotros los derechos humanos son universales e indivisibles. Y este posicionamiento se refleja en los foros multilaterales como el Consejo de Derechos Humanos, como los grupos núcleo LGBT de la UNAM y de la ONU y de la OEA, así como en el grupo de amigos del mandato del experto independiente sobre protección contra la violencia y la discriminación con motivo de orientación sexual o identidad de género, que por cierto aplaudimos y nos congratulamos de la extensión de su mandato. Fue algo que se antojaba difícil, pero nos llena de orgullo que se haya podido alcanzar. Les comparto que a partir de junio de este año, Rainbow Railroad y el Gobierno de México vamos a copresidir el grupo temático sobre protección humanitaria de la Coalición por la Igualdad de Derechos. Como ustedes saben, la coalición, México es miembro fundador de la coalición, detentamos la copresidencia por el último bienio, acabamos de terminar en diciembre, y esta copresidencia que ejercimos con Alemania, queríamos que no concluyera ahí, sino buscábamos darle continuidad, y es por ello, insisto, que nos llena de profundo orgullo trabajar con Rainbow Railroad en esta copresidencia. Rainbow ha sido un socio excelente en el abordaje de este tema, como creadores de la iniciativa queer de desplazamiento forzado, que surge de una realidad urgente a partir de la realidad de las personas migrantes y refugiadas LGBTQI+, que, como ya decía el doctor, enfrentan una vulnerabilidad única ante la violencia, la discriminación y la exclusión en su trayecto en búsqueda de protección y de una vida digna. Desde la persecución en sus países de origen hasta los riesgos en el tránsito, las barreras en las comunidades de acogida, las experiencias de estas poblaciones están marcadas por la falta de acceso a asistencia humanitaria adecuada y de sistemas de protección que en ocasiones los dejan fuera. Ante este panorama, la iniciativa queer se convierte en un espacio necesario y en una plataforma de largo plazo que reúne experiencias, organizaciones de la sociedad civil, actores internacionales y gobiernos, con el fin de generar soluciones innovadoras y colaborativas de protección. Expresión de esta urgencia fue la Mesa Redonda Global de 2021 sobre protección y soluciones para personas LGBTQI+ en situación de desplazamiento forzado, de las cuales emanaron 33 recomendaciones claves, entre ellas la creación de esta red multisectorial. Hoy la iniciativa presenta la posibilidad de articular respuestas locales, regionales y globales, además de asegurar que las voces y necesidades de las personas LGBTQI+, desplazadas se sitúen en el centro de los procesos de toma de decisión internacional. Este simposio es parte de una serie de consultas que se incorporan en la Queer Force Displacement Initiative y además, en lo personal, es una oportunidad para reconocer caras de aliados de activistas con quien siempre es un placer coincidir. Reconozco y agradezco su permanente compromiso en la primera línea de defensa de los derechos humanos de nuestros colectivos, pero también agradezco la oportunidad de estar en la UNAM, la presencia de investigadores, investigadoras, académicos, responsables de políticas públicas y defensores comunitarios de todos estos países. Durante estos 2 días exploraremos investigaciones innovadoras, compartiremos experiencias y trabajaremos en la construcción de principios orientadores que fortalezcan la respuesta global ante el desplazamiento forzado de personas LGBTQI+. El desplazamiento forzado es una experiencia devastadora que conlleva pérdidas incalculables, desde la separación de seres queridos y de entornos de apoyo, la privación de derechos humanos fundamentales y la amenaza constante, el temor constante de violencia, hasta en casos extremos la pérdida de la vida. Sin embargo, en medio de esta adversidad también encontramos esperanza y resiliencia. Estamos aquí para compartir conocimientos, experiencias y estrategias que no solo nos permitan comprender mejor las realidades de las personas desplazadas y reflexionar sobre los temas y prioridades locales que afectan a la comunidad, sino también diseñar soluciones efectivas que respondan a sus necesidades. Adicionalmente, este será un espacio para contrastar distintas realidades, para compartir ideas críticas y sugerencias sobre cómo podemos seguir avanzando para aminorar los efectos de esta crisis. La creación de alianzas estratégicas entre organizaciones, activistas, gobiernos y académicos son fundamentales para lograr un impacto real y duradero. Para cerrar, en nombre de la Cancillería y de la Coalición por la Igualdad de Derechos, quiero expresar mi más sincero agradecimiento a las organizaciones convocantes, a nuestros anfitriones y a todos aquellos quienes han trabajado para hacer posible este evento, así como a los panelistas y de excelencia que vamos a escuchar hoy, y a cada uno de ustedes, asistentes, que con su presencia enriquecerá nuestro diálogo. Les animo entonces a participar con el corazón abierto, con la mente dispuesta, sabiendo que cada una de nuestras contribuciones cuenta y que juntas, juntos, juntos podemos hacer la diferencia. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, embajadora. Ahora le voy a dar la palabra al doctor Ari Shaw, director de programas internacionales en el Williams Institute de la Universidad de California. Bienvenido.
Gracias, Marisol. Hello, good morning. Muy buenos días a todo el mundo. My name is Ari Shah, and on behalf of the Williams Institute, it is my very distinct honor to welcome all of you to this timely and important research symposium. We are absolutely thrilled to see so many of the leading researchers, advocates, and practitioners in this space gathered today in person and online to engage in what I think are really vital conversations about forced migration within the LGBTQI+ population, highlighting both challenges and, I hope, possibilities and opportunities. Briefly, for those who may not be familiar with the Williams Institute, we are a research center based at the University of California, Los Angeles, and we're dedicated to advancing the rights of LGBTQI+ people through rigorous, independent research. And for more than 2 decades, our mission has been to ensure that debates about law and policy that impact LGBTQI+ people are based on data and evidence, not myths and stereotypes. And it's that commitment to evidence and data that brings us here today. We all know that forced displacement is an urgent political and humanitarian issue, and it's a topic made even more pressing in this moment when migrants and refugees face particularly difficult circumstances, including new restrictions and human rights abuses under US policy. At a time when data collection in particular on LGBTQI+ people is being rolled back and targeted, the work of academics, community organizations, and allied governments becomes all the more critical. Understanding who is displaced, why, and with what consequences is absolutely essential to building effective policy responses and meaningful support systems. This symposium today reflects that same conviction that careful research grounded in lived realities can help drive change. We are incredibly grateful to our partners, Rainbow Railroad, in developing and convening this event today. Your resolute leadership of the groundbreaking Queer Force Displacement Initiative and your unwavering commitment to ensuring the safety of LGBTQI+ individuals in situations of forced displacement is more critical than ever. And this symposium is a testament to the vital work that you do, and we are proud to collaborate with you. Quisiera tomar un momento para reconocer a nuestros gran socios aquí en México también, sin los cuales esto no habría sido posible. Le agradezco muchísimo al equipo de SUDIMER y el Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas de la UNAM por su tremenda colaboración y liderazgo en esta área de investigación. Su trabajo académico riguroso y su compromiso de la justicia social han sido fundamentales para el desarrollo de este campo de estudios y el éxito de este simposio. Y también muchas gracias a Casa Frida, cuyo activismo y trabajo comunitario impulsan que se respeten los derechos de las personas LGBTIQ+ en situación de desplazamiento forzado o refugio en México. Estamos muy agradecidos de poder colaborar con todos ustedes. Muchas gracias. The partnership, I will finish by saying that we're excited in particular to have so many groups represented here, and that it really demonstrates the multi-sectoral approach that is necessary to meet the needs and create a more complete understanding of these issues. So thank you once again to our organizing partners, all of the researchers and presenters who are here today, and we really look forward to a productive and impactful 2 days. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, doctor Ari. Ahora le voy a dar la palabra a Hassan Guy, Senior Policy Officer in Rainbow Railroad. Bienvenido.
Thank you, Marisol. Gracias, Marisol. The English part of your opening starts now. My name is Hazem, and I like sometimes to say my name with the actual pronunciation because it gets lost whenever I travel to every different place. So it feels refreshing to say Hazem with a ha, a letter that cannot be said. Me and Swati are the leads of the Queer Force Displacement Initiative. We've been holding events across the Global South. And in our roundtable here in Mexico, it was in September of last year, someone said, being forcibly displaced is like being born again, but without your mother. And I thought of this, and I carried this through. And as a writer, I always said that I wish I wrote that line. I wish I could have written it. At that time, I was wearing my facilitator hat, not my personal hat. But both of those hats are a part of me. And today I will try to hold them together. Today we're gathered here to talk about forced displacement, a topic that often echoes in spaces that use fancy words, mostly in English: policies, UN, international laws, domestic legal practices, and rights charters, which sometimes provides you with the space to address highly traumatizing experiences with a certain level of detachment. Because the truth is, being born again without your mother is an experience you cannot just talk about. But I'm here to try. I did not know a word where I was not forcibly displaced. And this is not just for the tears, but for the facts that forced displacement sometimes is part of the inheritance that you're born with and you carry throughout your generation. Being born in a Palestinian refugee camp teaches you that home, here, and anywhere is really temporary. It's been 70 years or more, but still temporary. You try to create your own home, but you fail over and over. You're uprooted. When I decided that fighting for queer rights in my country was going to be my way to build a home, to fight for a cause would create a sense of belonging in wherever you are. But soon enough, I was thrown out for my activism. Now, this olive tree is trying to survive a minus 20 degrees weather in Canada and an endless legal procedure to prove that I can indeed be as white as they come, as white as possible, safe, denouncing every accusation of terrorism that follows my people. The truth is, no conference or change of policies can actually take away the trauma of being uprooted against your will. Despite all the work that we're doing, we just really need to remember that and keep that in our hearts and minds. It's going to stay, and you're going to live with it. And perhaps you will do something about it. I was lucky enough to be supported through a community that welcomed me, but many people are not. And the fight is quite literally you against the world. And I want to also acknowledge that in this room, there are people who are, whether academics or not, there are people who have experienced that personally, and they're holding that very heavily with them as they navigate this space. When we talk about the creation of a network to support people living with forced displacement, we're mostly trying to take a big action that takes a lot of money and a lot of work and a lot of stress and a lot of panic attacks and flights and all of these things, just to say to people that we're here, we're thinking of you, and we are trying. I want to thank you all for the work that you have done thus far, and that you will do later, because it does not go unnoticed. The world of academia can be isolating too, on top of the subject that's essentially isolating. So we're here to give each other a pat on the shoulder and be proud of each other and the hard work that we have done, and above all, to try to create a community. Thank you for being here, and I wish you have a great time, and as always, free Palestine. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Hasem. Espero que ahora lo haya dicho mucho mejor. Ahora vamos a tener un mensaje virtual de Víctor Madrigal Borlos, profesor de la Facultad de Derecho y experto independiente de la ONU en protección contra la violencia y discriminación por orientación sexual e identidad de género. ¿Me ayudan con el audio del video, por favor? ¿Me pueden ayudar con el audio de...? Ay, perdón, lo voy a repetir. ahora le daré la palabra a Swati Sekar, directora de Iniciativas de Protección en REU. Bienvenida, Swati. Sí. No, nada más es para una presentación. Ajá.
Okay, good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for these opening remarks. It was just great to hear from everyone. And thank you, really, everybody, for making it here. It was not easy, I know, for a lot of people to come here. We had a big Air Canada strike, but power to the workers, good for them. And, I know people had multi-day travel. We know it's been a bit of a difficult journey for a lot of folks. And I just want to acknowledge, we selected Mexico City for a lot of reasons to hold this academic symposium, but not least of which was because it is a country that's more accessible for people from around the world to enter and to cross borders, because we know that that is very, very hard in most parts of the world. But even with that, I just really want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who couldn't make it here, whose visas were refused, who got rejected at the border, and really particularly I want to just name that it's mostly people from the African continent who are in large part subject to what I would call a de facto visa ban from Mexico and many countries, in fact. So I just want to say that because it was difficult for us to really to know that that's a reality, and we have a lot of work to do in trying to dismantle these really oppressive and violent border systems. So I'm here to just do a brief introduction into the next section of this morning plenary session, and to just, as everybody's been doing, situate this symposium that we're having within the larger QFDI network building process. So this is an exceptional space for a lot of reasons, but I also want to just remind everybody that this is not an isolated conference. Our hope is that this is really the beginning where we can start to work together to bring researchers, academics, scholar activists into this conversation about how we build this global network. And really the goal of this symposium is to come out with a draft research agenda, a global research agenda on LGBT forced displacement, that we can collectively say, okay, here are gaps in the research, here's gaps in the data and in the evidence that we need in order to make relevant policies that are working for the people who are meant to have the protection. And so I want everybody, when we're navigating this space over the next couple of days, to really think about the symposium as embedded within this larger vision. As Casa mentioned briefly, and our partners as well, Rainbow Road is leading this 2-year network creation process where we're building the blocks to eventually, hopefully, launch this global network. We did consultations in Mexico City last September, then we moved to South Africa and Pretoria, then we went to Bangkok, then we had a roundtable with people in Turkey, and then we're moving to Kenya in October. And so these are key countries that are transit points for LGBT migrants. And so we're meeting with migrants, with civil society, with governments, with international organizations in all of those locations to ask them, what do you want from a network? Do you want this network? How can we build it so that you will be able to participate and we can make it a useful, relevant platform that doesn't just kind of exist in an echo chamber where we talk to each other? How do we translate this into practical solutions? And so that's where the symposium is embedded within this larger vision. We have a final conference that we held next year where we will hopefully be launching the network alongside a multi-stakeholder declaration where we can have principles for different stakeholders and commitments that will guide the network moving forward. And we want to bring you all into that. So hoping that after this, we continue to work together and that you guys continue to feed into this process as we move forward. Now, a key component of this symposium has been led by our QFDI, Queer Forced Displacement Initiative, research fellow, Ms. Nora Norala, who has been really leading and guiding the development of this symposium. And she would have shared with you, you would have received in your materials, a meta-analysis report that was produced, which is that Nora produced, which is a literature review of the existing research on LGBT forced displacement from a myriad of sources to identify the gaps in the research. And that's actually what informed our agenda today and tomorrow. What the gaps that that identified were what we tried to focus on in bringing our panels and our workshops and our papers together. So this is our start, and I just want to invite Nora to come up and start our presentation on the paper so we can really think about this as the foundation as we move forward, that we can continue to build on together in the coming months and years, maybe? Yeah.
Muchas gracias, Swati. Y bueno, pues antes de darle la palabra a Nora, nada más me voy a permitir dar unas pautas logísticas que tenemos que tener todas, todos y todes muy presentes a lo largo de nuestra jornada de los 2 días. Este es un instituto de investigación en pleno funcionamiento. Les pedimos, por favor, durante los traslados entre una aula y otra, mantenernos en el mayor silencio posible, porque hay varios colegas investigadores también realizando sus actividades y hay otros eventos también en otras aulas. Los patios son las áreas en común. En el patio del Ángel, que se encuentra en la planta baja, ahí se va a entregar el box lunch únicamente a quienes porten su gafete. Entonces es muy importante que su gafete lo traigan colgado los 2 días, porque esto también es lo que les da el acceso al coffee break y al box lunch que está marcado en su programa. Y bueno, pues no lo olviden el día de mañana, por favor. Recuerden que estas salas son alfombradas, entonces no se pueden ingresar alimentos o bebidas que estén destapadas. Si traen tapa o vienen en un termo, pueden ingresarlo, de lo contrario les pediremos que consuman los alimentos allá afuera. Respecto a la traducción simultánea, cada sala cuenta con equipo de traducción. Para hacer uso de este servicio deberán dejar una identificación oficial que se devolverá al entregar el dispositivo. En cada sala hay que hacer este cambio, por favor. Entonces, si van a cambiar de alguna sala o aula, entonces tienen que dejarlo y cuando lleguen a la otra también van a poder acceder al mismo equipo. Cada piso cuenta con baños y bebederos frente a los elevadores. En la planta baja se cuenta con un baño incluyente y un lactario. Les invitamos también a reducir el uso de plásticos de un solo uso. Si pueden guardarlo para seguirlo usando al resto del día, se los vamos a agradecer. En caso de emergencia, como ya lo escuchamos al inicio, hay algunas salidas de emergencia y hay un personal de protección civil que, en caso de ser necesario, ellos nos indicarán cuáles serán las cosas que tengamos que hacer para salvaguardar nuestra integridad. Pues también les rogamos mantenernos ajustados al tiempo. Sé que ahora nos robamos unos minutitos, pero en la medida de lo posible, sobre todo a los moderadores de las siguientes mesas, les pedimos ajustarnos a los tiempos para poder cumplir con el programa a cabalidad. Y bueno, pues también hay una red inalámbrica de Wi-Fi, se llama IJ Visitantes, a la cual todos pueden acceder. Y bueno, pues ya para cerrar esta mesa, decirles que tenemos un equipo de staff que por allá atrás se encuentran, están ahora con una camisa blanca. Ellos son un equipo del SUDIMER, a quienes también nos estarán apoyando en todas y cada una de las aulas. Y no quiero cerrar esta mesa inaugural sin antes agradecer todo el trabajo que se ha realizado previo, durante y pues también decirlo después de esta jornada. Quiero darle un agradecimiento muy especial a todo el equipo técnico del Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas, liderado por la maestra Alejandra Caballero y bueno, pues todo Fernando, Gerardo, Edna y bueno, muchos nombres más que me faltan. Agradecer muy en especial a Casa, Frida, a Aldo, Raúl, Mariana y el resto del equipo que no me sé sus nombres ahora, pero que les agradecemos mucho todo el trabajo.
al equipo de Rainbow, a Swati, a Dima, a Craig, a Hassem, a Nora, y bueno, por supuesto al equipo del SUDIMER, a Daniela, Fernando, a Briana, a Axel, Juan, Paulina, José Carrasco, José Pedraza, Ashley y Vanessa. Somos un batallón, pero estamos aquí justamente haciendo todo lo posible para que esto sea una gran jornada de diálogo y de construcción colectiva. Y bueno, pues sin más, este panel damos por inaugurado este simposio. Este panel lo despedimos con un fuerte aplauso y le daremos paso a la siguiente parte con Ari y con Nora.
Bueno, vamos a empezar. We're going to start the presentation of the literature review now. Marisol.
She said something I didn't understand.
Oh.
Okay, wait. Here she will come and do it.
Marisol, perdón, nos ayuda a ponerlo en la pantalla, la presentación. Gracias. Okay.
Okay, we will just start.
Yeah, just start.
It's good? Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, now it's working. Thank you, everyone. So for the people outside, please come in. This is not a break. You will have a nice lunch break very soon. Very good food, very yummy. So they told me I need to sit down for this, but I don't like sitting down. And I don't like speaking in mics either. So bear with me. So as Swati said, and as everyone said, like today is a very amazing day for us as Rainbow Railroad, and to be partners with amazing people, and to be here in the room with like also very interesting people that we're looking forward to hear from. So a lot of you might think, oh, why did we choose the themes for this symposium like this? Or why did we have this design like this? Or why my proposal got accepted and my friend proposal didn't? Today you will know. Lucky you have the information in front of you. Transparency is important for us at Rainbow Railroad. So this report has already have been dismantled. Just like how many people saw this report before like hearing about it now? Okay, so Rainbow Railroad saw it, that's the important part. So this will be just a teasing. I really encourage all of you to go and look like at the report at full, because there's just like a very brief summary of it. Oh, huh? Ah, okay, now we are back. I don't know what happened, but we'll get there, guys. So first of all, before we start, like every research has a research question. This is the academic part of it. I don't want to like annoy you with too much academia, and this thing doesn't work well enough, so bear with me again. So as Victor said, like global forced displacement is a very big issue currently. It has always been a big issue from the first time that refugee as a category was acknowledged during the First World War and so on. It has been a big issue ever since. But now, ever since, it has been increasing with the increasing acts of violence around the world, including the Gaza genocide, the Congo genocide, the Sudan genocide, and everything that we're seeing, all of this leading to more increase that's happening. So within this increase, there is one group that is always missing from the conversation. People who are fleeing because they are queer, even if they are not fleeing because of their queer identity. So people who have that identity, but they're just fleeing. Maybe they're fleeing from that violence, maybe they're fleeing from queer violence and so on. So we wanted to answer one question that you can see is very big in green. What is the current state of the research and queer forced displacement? And out of this question, we have multiple questions that came out of the way. And in the end of the day, we aim for us to use this document as a guidance, not only for academics, for policymakers, for community organizers, for NGOs. We hope that we can assist the civil society also in using this finding to advocate for their rights. And we hope for policymakers to listen to what we found in the literature. So the methodology, this is again the boring academic parts. So I'm gonna run through the boring academic stuff. Don't worry, we're not gonna stick to it. So we looked at 275 pieces of literature. That include academic and gray literature. And we looked at it from Scopes, from Google Scholar, from Zogica, from Relief Web, and so on. And we looked at at the past 5 years. Someone will ask, of course, why only the past 5 years? Only the past 5 years because we wanted to have the most updated information on queer forced displacement. As I mentioned earlier, this field is a very dynamic field that changes by the day. This is up from 2019 to 2024. By 2025, we have issues that are not covered, such as the Gaza genocide, such the Trump administration, such as Germany new right-wing government. All of this is not covered. So, and this is all like in the span of just a year within we are finishing the review. So this is a very dynamic field. This is why we limited it to 5 years, so we can have the most updated information available. So the challenges, if you notice, we at Rainbow Railroad, we do not use asylum, we do not use refugee. We say forced displaced. And this is intentional. We did not want to look at this as an asylum issue. We wanted to look at this at people who internally displaced, people who cannot be applying for asylum, who moved on other kind of visas, people who are displaced because of natural disaster, not because of their social identities, and so on and so on. Unfortunately, the literature is very asylum-based, is not really a forced displacement based. So the information that we will present today is very much based on asylum. because unfortunately the literature, even the literature that uses forced displacement, they always frame it in the asylum-seeking terms. We also wanted to like look into like how people move through like different routes. Is it like legal? Is it illegal? The difference between the privilege of having a legal entry and illegal entry and so on. Unfortunately, again, the literature did not really have enough information on this to have concrete data to be presented in this review. And the gray literature, the main issue, we do not have database for NGO reports. So you need to go through each NGO that you know of. So we might have missed some of the reporting in the NGO just because we didn't know that this group published something. Because unfortunately we have, yes, Relief Web and all of this, but they don't put up everything. Like, you know, so in the end of the day, you need to go to the websites and look at like what they have. And then of course, in this dynamics, the smaller groups who might have published amazing research, it has been a blind spot as well. So for the people who like numbers, I hope that you all like numbers. So this is the numbers part. So we relied on a methodology that incorporates a mix of like a meta-analysis, so a lot of numbers, and a scooping review, so a lot of thematic analysis. So and this way we have like a more comprehensive like look at the situation, and not just like bunch of data that you see. I'm sorry about the mic, by the way. I'm not used to these mics, so. So the first thing like I want to say that this field is quite growing. It's not growing as big as like if you look at human rights law publications, for example, but it has been growing as like reaching 50 publication or even over 50 publication in the past 2 years. And the main method that are used in the publications, okay, for people on Zoom, hi. So, and the main method that are used in these publications are, as you see, qualitative is the biggest, and this includes everything under the qualitative, like as for the non-academic audience, like this includes interviews, like observations, ethnography, and so on. And quantitative is actually very limited to only 8%, and the mixed method are 7. The rest are more theoretical papers who did not have human participations in it, like legal studies fields, like media studies, and so on. So the identities, and this is very important for us to look at, like which identities that are most represented. Unfortunately, first, not all studies actually mention which identities they're talking about. They just use vague terminology, so it's hard to tell who. And secondly, they use LGBTQ without breaking it down. And this was a very big challenge for us to know which group that they actually want to talk about. Because when they say LGBTQ, most of the time it's just cis gay men with two maybe of the sample who are trans or something. So it was very challenging also to get a very good overview of like which identity is what. The other identities that are represented that were focus of solely of the study are like cis queer woman were 7%. And the word queer here is used like more fluidity to refer to sexuality, because in the end of the day, like this was a review, so like we didn't have a control of what people were writing, so a lot of people just said like queer or like bi, lesbian, so they didn't really identify what kind of like sexuality that people have. Trans, and again, there is very hard to break down what do they include at trans, so some studies did break it down into non-binary, trans men, trans women, but like majority just wrote trans. And then they have cis queer men independently, not LGBTQ. And non-LGBTQ are people who are like lawyers, case workers, and so on, and judges. And impressively, it's 16%. It's mostly a European literature, to be honest, that is 16%, which obviously the access there to like state employees is much easier. So where do the literature focus for the host and transit countries? As you see, this is a heat map we have here. And obviously, like the majority are in the US. After all, we did this literature on only English publications. So obviously, I'm very sure there's a lot of Spanish publication that covers more of like the Latin American part. But this was in English. So we have the US and UK and Germany are the top 3, which actually does not align with the global numbers. If you check the refugee or asylum seeker or people on the move number from the UNHCR, the majority actually stay in the global south. They do not move to the global north. So we have very small representation of that. And Turkey is the most one. and Iran is like one study, and you have Colombia as like 2 studies, and so on. We have countries that are absolutely absent, like Egypt, for example. Those are a very big hub, especially now with the Gaza genocide. It is like something that a lot of people moving towards there. And we have like the African continent, as you see, like is a very small focus as well. And Bangladesh, despite Bangladesh being like a very major host countries. Okay. Okay, so we're not going to talk about the numbers anymore because people don't. So this is where people came from in the literature, where people came from. As you see, it's very diverse here, and actually this more aligns with the global statistics. So the majority are Syria, and this is obvious why. Like, as we know, European Union funding and immigration research was really directed towards Syrian populations because of like the immigration crisis they had. And you know, academia usually goes where the funding is going, so this is the most representative group. But we also have countries like the Russian Federation, and within the Russian Federation there is subgroups of that you cannot put on a heat map, like Chechnya and so on, that were like identified independently, and so on. So the settling, the stages of forced displacement, this is something that we wanted to look at. What stage that literature actually examines. And when we say literature in here, we talk about the stages of displacement. So for example, it's before you even moved. In transit, you're still on the move. Settling is within 5 years of you applying for asylum. You're still waiting. Maybe you just got it, but you're still living in like whatever is called detention center, camp, whatever the country calls it. And the post is like you finish everything. You are now living as basically an immigrant, or like you got the citizenship even, and so on. As you see, the literature focused heavily on the settling stage, especially the interview stages and the detention center stages. This is what literature really focus on in the current state of the queer forced displacement. So now the themes, so less numbers if people hate numbers, but less photos. So I'm sorry about that. So we did it into five themes. I'm not gonna go through all of them because they are too much to look at. But the first is basically, why do people leave? And most of the literature just focus on like the reasons related to SOGI. So there is no intersectional analysis that people might leave because of war and they are queer. They just focus on the fact that they are queer, this is why they moved, which is a very oversimplified narrative if you ask me. The systematic failure, of course we are familiar with people who went through the asylum system, how it looks like, and so on. The intersectional discrimination, whether in employment, housing, even if you have a residency, you still cannot get that. The humanitarian response, and this is relates to like humanitarian crisis like in the Congo, and so on, is a very like queer blind that doesn't address the people, and of course how people organize the resilience and the chosen families and so on. I'm not gonna go through these highlights here because we have no time. So, so we will just the key recommendation from the literature itself. So the literature itself, each literature had its own recommendation, of course, and these are like just like a summary of it. So of course they wanted like legal reform, which includes like recognize of gender expression and so on. Enhanced services, like providing more services when arrival and so on. And community empowerment, improved research, funding for research, funding for NGOs, and all of this was like, came out of the literature. So the key gaps, I think we all like noticed some gaps that already exist. So we'll go through this like one by one. So methodological gap. Obviously, quantitative research is urgently needed. There is not enough studies that actually looks at a quantitative aspect like into like data, hard data of this. Longitudinal research also that looks into like into the things on the long term, and research that looks beyond asylum seeking, of course. And thematic analysis, of course, like climate change, like intersex people, the concept of chosen family, this also can be explored further. Demographic gaps. We don't have research on queer children, for example, or youth or elderly. Most of the time it's like the regular age that you would think of, like which is 18 to 40 maybe. internally displaced people is really missing from the literature, surprisingly, despite internally displaced people being a large population of people who are forced displaced, but is completely missing from the literature, except for very few studies that introduce the concept, but it's very much missing. And geographic gaps, as you notice, people still think of this in literature as a south to north kind of the experience, while obviously it's not. Like, a lot of people do stay in the south, and so on. Of course, like, the more recommendations, you can find it in the report. As I said, there's just a summary. So what recommendation do we have? Like, so the short answer, like, we just need to fill these gaps. It's not rocket science, like, we can just fill this gap. I know it's a mind-blowing statement. So just like fill the gaps, do more research on it. This is the short non-academic answer. That long, very long academic answer is all of this. So if you want the long academic answer, again, like, you can find it in the report. I very much encourage you to go look at the report, see what's in it, because we have more recommendations, as you see, and these recommendations are designed in a way to inform research agenda, advocacy agenda, like policymakers reforms, and so on. And this is, as I said in the beginning, we try to make this report as comprehensive as possible, to not just be a boring academic report that no one in the end will read, although no one read it in the room. But I hope when you read it, you will see that, like, it is, like, useful beyond just academia. It is a very intersectional report that can be used for every part of our communities. And thank you, and open for questions.
similar. ¿Alguna otra pregunta? Si pueden leer este informe, es bastante bueno. Muchas gracias. Y ahora vamos a tener un receso. Una de las sesiones va a estar en esta sala y la siguiente va a estar en una de las salas cercanas, y en los talleres, bueno, ustedes podrán preguntarle a las personas que están por aquí afuera. Si necesitan algo, por favor contáctenos o búsquenos para que les demos información adicional.